Welcome to the Squared Circle Pit with your host, Rob Pasbani.
Now entering the Squared Circle Pit, the MLW World Champion, Alex Hammerstone. Alex, thank you very much for joining me here today.
Hey, thanks for having me, brother.
Here on the Squared Circle Pit, we're all about the intersection of rock and pro wrestling. And I hear you're a rock guy. And I was curious, what did you discover first? Your love of pro wrestling or your love of rock?
My love of pro wrestling was first because that was when I was just a little kid, probably eight years old or so. That being said, I got into music before I got into wrestling as far as actually partaking in it. So I think I got my first drum set by the time I was like 10 years old, and then I played through bands all throughout high school. And then after I graduated is when I got into pro wrestling and kind of when I put the music on the back burner for a little while.
So what kind of bands were you in? What kind of music were you playing?
I did a little bit of everything. I was kind of like a garage rock band. I played in kind of a punk band, played in a ska band. I played in a metal band. I was very busy. I ended up kind of being the guy that played with any and every group. And then on top of that, I was the drummer for the school jazz band. So I really dipped my hand in every kind of musical genre available.
Yeah, drummers are hard to come by. You know, you're the ones having to have the most it's the most expensive instrument to play, I feel, because you need so much gear.
Yeah, and but that being said, now I played basically exclusively guitar. I sold my drum set a few years ago, and although a single drum set is much more expensive than a single guitar, now I find myself in the money pit of buying multiple guitars that are all very.
Go back to the wrestling. What was your first wrestling memory ever? Do you remember?
I can't say I remember a specific. I don't have like some story like, getting hit in the head with a coconut, or I don't remember any specific moment like that, or like the Hogan leg drop, but I think like I started watching like Sunday Night Heat, or Shotgun Saturday Night, or whatever was on late on public television because we didn't have cable. So I remember guys, like Gangrel, like being like a main event star because he was like the main eventer of those shows, But I think the first things that obviously captured my like love for it was probably like DX, and the crotch chop and Suck It and that kind of stuff, and obviously like Stone Cold and The Rock, but probably like DX was like the biggest thing that was like just so cool, like we sit there drawing, the DX jerseys and things like that.
So those were your guys, DX and Steve Austin?
I was kind of into all kinds of things, but especially once like SmackDown came out, because that was on UPN. I was into Triple H. I was into Kane. I was, I kind of liked everything except, the blatantly annoying acts,
Yeah. You were just into the spectacle of it all.
Yeah, we just loved it. And, especially having an older brother who, if we played wrestling and he got to be all the cool wrestlers, I had to be the mid-carder. So I had to find joy in them.
That's great. So, and then how did you start getting into music? What were some of the bands that got you diving in?
I think like Blink-182 was probably like one of the first bands I liked. The Strokes, I remember when I first heard them and I was like, I think a lot of people, what their favorite thing is something they just decide at a young age and then they just like stick with it. Because it's like, what's my favorite band? I always just say the Strokes, even though I probably don't listen to them as much as I listen to other bands. But I just remember at the time I heard them and they were so cool and different to anything I had heard. And I was like, this is my favorite band now. And I've just said that ever since. So that was like one of my favorites. But yeah, I was just kind of into like everything. I especially over the years, I get into a little bit of everything from time to time. And being a musician myself and writing stuff, I always love checking out new stuff because you kind of get influenced by what you're listening to. And if you're listening to the same stuff all the time, you kind of start churning out the same stuff all the time. So I always like to keep fresh, new stuff coming into the old noggin.
How do you discover music? Do you have friends that recommend it? Do you like check Spotify playlists?
Pandora, YouTube surfing. Yeah, I'm really behind. I don't do Spotify or anything. But yeah, if friends recommend something, or if I just hear of something or catch something on the radio. But it's anyone's guess how I find the newest thing.
I hear you. And so you mentioned you got in during like the Attitude Era. I'm guessing at some point you like really got into it, right? Like when was it that you became like obsessed with wrestling? Would you say?
I mean, I would say I got out of it for a couple years. Like around like probably like 2004, I kind of stopped watching wrestling, and then I got back into it around the time I was graduating high school, around like 2008, and that was mostly because like I was into weightlifting and John Cena like videos, and then I started watching him, and then I got back into wrestling through that, and that's when I got like really in. I was like, I think I can do this,
Hmm.
and so I kind of got to thank good old John for getting me back into wrestling.
I'm curious, like what made you kind of fall out of it? It's just getting into high school, kind of like the point where you're like, oh, I'm growing out of it, kind of thing. And also, I guess the storylines were a little weak around that era.
I don't know if I necessarily. I think it was a very subtle transition. It's not like one day I decided I didn't like it anymore. I think some of our favorites were disappearing. Stone Cold was gone, The Rock was gone,
Hmm.
uh, Lesnar was gone. A lot of the guys who I liked were gone, and so I just wasn't like as enthralled with it. And then just getting into high school, getting into other things, getting different hobbies, getting into music and being super involved in bands and all those things kind of just took precedent. Yeah, like it wasn't like I didn't think it was like cool or it was dumb to like it anymore. I just kind of slowly watched less and less until I didn't even watch it. And also, I don't remember if it moved to a cable network. At no point during my childhood, yeah, and yeah. So after that, I was like, I didn't even have any way to watch it. Didn't even have the internet. So like, I grew up poor, so I had no cable, had no internet. So once it wasn't on public television, I was like, maybe rent a DVD from Blockbuster to watch, like the Royal Rumble or something. But that was it.
Yeah, I'm a little older than you, and it was the same for me. I never had cable until, thankfully, like right during the peak with the Monday night stuff. But yeah, like growing up, I only had the free shows to be able, like, I wouldn't know what happened until in the pay per view until the following week when they showed the recap or whatever. So I
Yeah.
totally I totally remember stuff like that. So it's interesting because I feel like as you grew your MLW persona and kind of found your Hammerstone character, you sort of began emulating Hulk Hogan a bit, like classic Hulk Hoganisms. But telling me now you got into wrestling kind of, I guess Hulk Hogan made his return to WWE, so you saw that. Was that like your main exposure to it? Like how did you get into the classic Hulk Hogan thing?
I mean, I kind of backtracked and watched a lot of that stuff, but like, I mean, I do remember. So, like I said, when we first got into wrestling, one of the ways we would watch wrestling is renting VHS tapes from Video Update, because like we'd watch wrestling, and then we had to stay up till like midnight to watch it, and we were little kids, so it's like even if our parents would let us, which they wouldn't, so we'd have to be breaking the rules. Even if we were like trying to break the rules, a lot of times we would just fall asleep on accident anyways. So then it's like you catch wrestling one or two times a month. So what we do is we would rent the VHS tapes from the store, and that's when I saw guys, like the Ultimate Warrior and stuff like that, and Hulk Hogan, and like to be honest, I wasn't that as much like into it because you're not watching the episodic television and understanding the storylines and understanding who's who. You're just watching like big pay-per-view matches. And when you're a kid, you don't really like wrestling for the wrestling. You like it for everything else that it is. But that being said, like I remember thinking the Ultimate Warrior was a superhero and thinking how larger than life Hulk Hogan was and thinking Lex Luger was so cool and all these things. And it's like, why did I think that? And it had nothing to do with their wrestling. So I now when I try to borrow from Luger and from Hogan and from Warrior and from Psycho Sid and all these like elements, I'm not copying the wrestling spots. I'm trying to take mannerisms or facials or taunts or things that I thought were so cool and larger than life that just created an experience for me as a kid. And that a lot of guys today, for some reason, think it's like dumb to do that. But it's like, okay, so you're gonna do a super kick, a Canadian destroyer. You're basically gonna have a Young Bucks match every night, but to sit there and emulate a taunt makes you some kind of copycat or makes you stupid or makes it cheesy. It's like I don't know. It's kind of bizarre to me, but those were things that always grabbed me as a kid. So I try to incorporate that into my presentation.
It's interesting that you say that because I feel like nowadays there's far more wrestlers emulating, like for example, you use the Young Bucks, than there would be a Lex Luger or a Hulk Hogan. So in that way, you stand out now because there's no real, it's not, I don't want to say there's fewer heavyweights, like really heavyweight looking dudes, especially on the indie scene. So it makes you stand out even more if you're doing this stuff.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, like I'm just doing what feels right, what I enjoy, what makes it fun. And it's like, if someone, trust me, I see people complain on the internet and they're not going to change my mind. I'm not trying to go out and have the perfect wrestling match for them. I'm trying to have the perfect wrestling match in kind of my eyes. And if the crowd is going nuts for me, and then I go home and see someone tweeting and saying how stupid it was, well, guess what? I don't really care.
Is that something that you avoid doing, like checking your replies after an event, or do you can you not look away?
I'm quite the opposite. I'm kind of obsessively I like to see that stuff, and having the name Hammerstone and being able to search that keyword makes it very easy to find stuff. It's not like my name is, like Tom Johnson, where I have to scroll through, 100 posts to see one about me. It's pretty much, if they're using the word Hammerstone, they're talking about some weird marketing company or me. So yeah, I will search and I will see what people have to say, and I'll take the good with the bad. I'm also very curious about what people are saying about the MLW product. Like after every big show, I like to look up the reviews and I like to see it. That being said, I was told something very early on in my career, and that's when someone says you suck, don't believe it. And when someone says you're great, don't believe it. So it's like, you can't just go by like what you read. If I read a tweet and someone says, "Oh, you're my favorite wrestler, you're the best," I go, "Oh, I'm the best. I'm the best." It's settled. That's just as arrogant and silly as reading a tweet that someone says you suck and then having a pity party for yourself for the next couple of days.
I agree completely with both takes, but then how do you decide what is constructive criticism and what is just like hating or what have you?
You have to find people whose opinion you value and decide where to place that weight, and some people value, trust me, there are people whose opinion I value who will criticize me and say something and I go, I don't like that, but maybe there's something to it. And then there's people who I think are complete idiots and will say something about me and I go, screw you, I'm going to do it twice as hard. Like the main thing is, regardless of what people are saying, I always try to keep myself grounded in the sense of like, I'm never going to just become comfortable and kind of slack off. Like I always have this weird chip on my shoulder that like, I read enough of the negativity and keep up with enough of it to always have like this, boiling inside of me of like, these people are waiting for you to mess up. They're waiting for you to suck. They're waiting for you to botch. They're waiting for you to get blown up. They're waiting for you to have a bad match or cut a bad promo. So I always have this like bit of like tenacity, like inside of me to work hard to avoid that. Because even if I can ignore a comment, it doesn't mean it doesn't sting every time you hear it,
In a way that the hatred almost drives you. It sounds like it.
You have to. You have to do something with it.
You mentioned renting VHS tapes. I loved renting VHSs. My go-to was always WrestleMania 2 because it had the 3 different locations. Did you have a go-to tape that you like to rent?
I honestly don't remember. I did like the classic Royal Rumble VHSs because they had like those cartoons with like all the wrestlers on them, and I was like, that they just looked so cool visually. There was some I don't remember what event it was, but the VHS case just had the Ultimate Warrior logo on the front and his eyes, but like a cartoon version of it. And I would always get that because it's like a superhero. And then it was like probably like the worst match ever, but it just looked so cool.
Yeah, it kind of, it's to your point of like the Ultimate Warrior. For me as well, he was like, I was so enamored with him. I loved him. He just looked great. Like he had the crazy pump, the fluorescent gear. Like he just stuck out. How could you not love him? And like you said, as a kid, kids don't care about work rate. They're not there judging the psychology. They just want something that looks cool.
Yeah, I try to explain to guys like all the time in locker rooms, like, yeah, there's something, a match should make sense. A match can have a great story, but also a lot of times I'm like, you guys are trying to pop the boys. Like when you have a guy, Marufuji, you're Marufuji, deduct your thing to counter this move. They don't know what you're countering. They don't even understand. It just looks like a bunch of nonsense. And then finally someone hits a move. Like you guys are being marks for yourselves by thinking, like if an engineer started explaining like a complicated mathematical situation to you, it's like, dude, you need to dumb this down for me a little bit. And sometimes in modern wrestling, people wrestle for this super niche crowd to try to understand these super complex spots. And it's like, yeah, that's cool. Sometimes it's good to be able to do that. It's good to be able to know that. But at the same time, it's like you said, sometimes you got to go out there and be the Ultimate Warrior. It's crazy to me that people as a kid can have grown up like yourself or myself and say, I love the Ultimate Warrior because he looked so cool. He had this flashy gear. He had this cool theme song. And then when they start wrestling, they go, oh, I want to wrestle as Dick Thomas and have plain black boots and plain back tights and be a mat grappler. And it's like, cool. Yeah, that's like, how did you get to that point? Not saying there's anything wrong with it. It's just, you got to know when to do what and how to adjust and how to cater. And I don't know. I think it's something that in modern wrestling gets lost on a lot of people.
Is there anyone on the scene right now, it doesn't have to be an MLW guy, that you think you would have your best possible match with that person, that you two would gel perfectly?
I think the best matches I've ever had are Davey Richards and Fatu. So that being said, me and Fatu have a rematch scheduled for MLW. We have not had a singles match in the company since I defeated him for the World Heavyweight Championship. We have a rematch scheduled for the Heavyweight Championship coming up in the next couple months, which is going to be on Reels. Got to plug that. So that's very exciting because the last time we wrestled, I suffered a very severe injury about halfway through the match and had to finish the match on, basically 1 foot. And despite people telling me to this day that that's one of the best matches they've seen or the best MLW match or their favorite match or whatever they tell me, it's all very nice, but I have a bad taste in my mouth because I felt like that could have been so much more, and to this day, like I finished that match and I was just disappointed. And maybe I shouldn't have been, maybe it should have been an even cooler moment. Like I overcame this hurdle or this struggle, but I just felt disappointed. So to be able to have a rematch coming up against him, knowing the chemistry we have together, knowing how incredible of a wrestler he is and what he's capable of, I think that's I'm expecting that to be the best match of my career up to this point.
That is exciting. I did love the first match. It was a really cool hoss fight, something you don't see that often anymore in American wrestling. So It was really, really cool, and I look forward very much to the rematch. So what about like if you had a time machine and you could go and wrestle any legend, what match would you book yourself in?
Maybe Kurt Angle in his prime, Chris Jericho in his prime. Not to say that he's not still doing incredible stuff. Shawn Michaels, or this is one that's like up until obviously a couple of years ago, like I still had it in my head that it was a possibility. It's Triple H, because I was a huge fan of Triple H growing up, and if you notice for a couple of years, what Triple H did was when a new guy got in the company that was like kind of under his wing, he'd like build to like a big WrestleMania match with Batista. He did it with Sheamus. He did it with a couple guys. And I was like, oh, maybe like I'll get signed in time and go to there and I'll be the guy and I'll wrestle Triple H at WrestleMania, but obviously that ship sailed. But yeah, those are a couple of the guys who I think, because as much as I talk about liking the showmanship of wrestling and the presentation, the character, all that stuff, when it comes to a match, like I still go into it wanting to have like a great match and wanting to be able to give it everything. So I think all those guys I listed were really capable of that.
I'm surprised it wasn't like wrestling the Ultimate Warrior at like WrestleMania 6 or something like that.
No, I mean, that's the thing. Like I said, like as much as like I was enthralled by him myself, now wrestling him, I feel like I would just get pissed off. Like, dude, why are you blown up? We're 3 minutes in. Like watching Hogan carry him through WrestleMania, like what a testament to how great Hogan was. Like to get a somewhat passable match out of that. But yeah, I am especially as I've gotten older, and kind of just less patient with guys. Like if I'm in a ring with somebody and they're huffing and puffing and out of breath and not keeping up, I start to get really bad really quick.
I read that with that Hogan Warrior match, I believe that Pat Patterson like wrote out move for move and they practiced it a few times. That's how it ended up working out. I think that was the story. So
I mean, I wouldn't doubt that, but I also believe Hogan's in there kind of telling him what to do, telling him to let him and catch his breath, telling him when to, stay here, go to here, move to this, because.
Well, I think Hogan is the master of crowd manipulation. Like if you watch WrestleMania 18, the match with him and The Rock, like the crowd was on his side, but he got them totally on his side. Like he got them to turn The Rock just based on his little, like the way he sells. That's one of my all-time favorite matches.
Yeah, same here. It gives me chills every time I watch it.
And so what if you were able to bring in a rock star to team with you? Who would be your rock star tag team partner?
Man, are there any jacked rock stars out there?
Well, there's Henry Rollins. That's the first one. I guess not so much anymore. Henry and his
maybe like Prime Danzig.
That would work. I think Danzig's a big wrestling fan. He might be a Hammerstone guy. You don't know. He watches the indie stuff.
Yeah, man. That's a little bit of a curveball. I wasn't ready for that one. I don't think I have a great for you.
88 James Hetfield, Metallica James.
Yeah, that could work. Yeah, he's got to look for him.
Yeah, I think it's a good. You guys could be like cousins or something. That could.
And he always played those Explorer guitars. So, if he did the Jeff Jarrett and cracks him with a guitar, he's a good chance he's going to hit him with a pointed edge. It's going to be lights out.
What guitars? So, what are some of the guitars that you have?
I have 2 Explorers myself. I have a couple custom guitars I just had made over the last couple months. Yeah, hey there.
Oh, look at these beauties. Oh, I love that. I love the
yeah. So, but I also have a girlfriend who is very nitpicky about the space they take up. So, if I was to try to buy another one right now, I'm pretty sure I'd come home with my stuff on the porch. So.
All right. Well, Alex, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out and chat for a little bit. You can catch Hammerstone on MLW Tuesday nights, 10 p.m. on Reels. I'm very excited for this Fatu match, and I wish you nothing but great success in professional wrestling. I think you have a great look, and I hope you take it far.
Hey, thank you very much, man. I had a blast.
All right, man. I'll see you at the matches.